This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Lance Lambert from BovedaInc.com. How are you, friend?
I am good, man. We're catching up early this week. I love this. How are you doing?
A little early, bud. You know, we got, I guess we got Thursday, Friday. We got shows in town for JFL42.com. We're broadcasting live from where everyone stays there. What's the hotel called here in Toronto?
The Hyatt Regency. It just, I think, got renamed a couple of years ago.
Okay, yeah. You know, and aside from Lance, real quick, if you're a comedy fan, people go to the Hyatt Regency because that's where all the big comics in town are hanging out. Like those be at the bar there, and you know, you obviously don't go and like try and sneak in someone's room or anything. But you know, hey, Lance, how are you?
Oh, good times, man.
Whereabouts are you?
Definitely been good. I am home. I'm home for a minute. Actually heading out to Las Vegas tomorrow for a few meetings. Not a bad place to go. A little warm still this time of year, but yeah, off the road for a minute, so it's been nice. And a lot of stuff going on, so I've just been getting caught up.
Yeah, Southern Cal is where Lance lives, which has been sort of at the forefront of all this legalization stuff as California, one of the first states to say, hey, let's do this. So quickly about BovedaInc.com, you say lots going on. What is going on?
Yeah, just, getting ready for Q4. This is definitely a time of year. Right now, all of the growers and producers are getting ready to take down, as they say, or essentially pull down their crops for processing, and we're right about to hit what's called Croptober. So just getting ready for all the needs on the grower-producer side, and obviously applicable to everything from the micro home grower up to the large-scale licensed producers that, their total output can be hundreds of thousands of kilos. So we help everyone as far as, maintaining that consistent cure and storage and even transportation. There's companies, there's LPs out of Canada are supplying the medical programs in countries like Germany, in Spain. So for us to be a part of that is really important. So we're making sure we're all ready to go for the big push.
Yeah, it's a real big push. And I was asking about the science behind Boveda Inc. and your two-way humidity control packs. Obviously, it's a pretty top secret kind of pack, and others are, might try and steal it and emulate it. But, it's interesting because, man, in my travels, people know we work together and stuff, and people, looking to buy it, obviously. And, it comes up often where people just like, yeah, it's sort of like a miracle. I just throw it in there, and it's like it's unreal. Like, it's sort of like it's great. I mean, what a great – you're helping people. You're helping people save money.
Yeah, saving money and really maintaining quality and consistency. And you mentioned myself being a cancer survivor, so I've been a medical advocate for some time. And that's one thing I can't stress enough. It's just imperative in maintaining that quality and consistency of this flower. It's very dynamic. In many respects, it's kind of an enigma. We're still figuring out the diversity of the cannabinoids and the terpenes and flavonoids that make up this wonderful flower, but maintaining that is a big factor. So from a medical advocacy standpoint, I love hearing back from patients who are like, I know that the quality is going to be there. I know the consistency is going to be there in what I consume. It's not going to dry out. It's not going to lose the terpenes. It's not going to lose, its potency. But really, as far as the magic, that's what's crazy is, just speaking of being up there in BC, in Vancouver at ICBC, there was a gal that came over and grabbed a pack, and she was sharing with a couple of her friends with her company about the product. And the guy's like, well, yeah, but what chemicals inside? And I normally kind of let people leave. I'm not trying to be a yenta and get in anyone else's business, but I was like, I couldn't help it overhear you guys. And honestly, there's no chemical. I mean, what's inside is non-proprietary. We literally harness Mother Nature as far as normalizing the relative humidity in the environment. And we do that with salt. And so that salt, which our technology does maintain it in the pack, but it's that salt along with water and xanthan gum. Those are the three elements. So it's essentially kind of a salt-flavored gum formula, not that I recommend chewing it or eating it. It's not the best tasting, that's inside the pack. Where our patent and our technology exist is this film that's a membrane. It only allows osmosis of moisture in and out of the pack. So only moisture leaves the pack, only moisture enters the pack. So the salt never leaves, just like the terpenes, cannabinoids, or anything else doesn't enter the pack. That's really where the magic and the patent and the science is for us. So it's pretty fun.
if you go on Twitter, and I won't name sort of company names and stuff, but you'll see a lot of people still, and we will also discuss sort of the 100 million sales in Canada that was, topped July in the first time 100 million. But a lot of people complaining about very dry product and that they're not happy with their purchases. Do you hear a lot of those complaints?
My gosh, we do. It's one thing that's been very impressive. Again, we kind of talk about the stereotype, and not just between America and Canada, but a better part of the world very much looks at Canadians as so friendly, very easygoing, very laid back. But man, you guys, when it comes to cannabis, very outspoken, and nowhere is more evident than, to your point, on Twitter, on Instagram, even on Facebook, where these individuals are calling out LPs and saying the flower is too dry. And it's interesting because there is a complaint program that exists within the country to where if there are a certain amount of complaints that, according to the regulations set forth by Health Canada, they need to be addressed. That's something that does have to be addressed. And so that's kind of a conundrum that the LPs are finding themselves in, is that the consumer is being outspoken, is saying that, hey, if I paid for 3.5 grams, I expect 3.5 grams. I don't expect it to be broken up into flakes or keef at the bottom of the container. So I think it's great that the consumer is speaking volumes and saying, if we're going to move this to a legal market, like a majority of us voted on to do so, then we want to see that retention of quality and consistency of flower that we're accustomed to prior to this, which in your instance is the medical program. Just like what we had here in California, we had medical for 20 years before the legalization of adult use came about. So we knew what good flower looked like also,
Yeah, well, without a doubt, you know what good flower looks like. You've been humble, but one of the things, Lance, that comes up continually, and I would say over the last couple of months, despite those 100 million in sales in July, is the quality we're talking about, but really the black market still, and that existing so strong.
Yeah.
And this is a topic coming up more and more and more and more, to the point where it's sort of, I think, a really irresponsible approach by our government to not take measures and crack down on it. Because one, why are you allowing illegal operations and organized crime to sort of exist? Because that's just ultimately, one, like I said, illegal, but also hurting tax dollars, and there's no consistency and there's no control. And then two, and I think this is something that's really creeped in my head as of late more than ever, and I've shared it before with a few other guests in the cannabis space that pop on our show. I don't believe I've shared it with you yet, Lance, is that just the idea that there's a lot of Canadians investing into the marketplace. They're investing into publicly traded cannabis companies. And yeah, there was a great sort of window there where I think anyone could have just thrown a dart at any of them and made a ton of money. And now you're trying to truly invest in long term, and we've seen a fall down of it's quite frightening. A lot of people lost a lot of money, and I think it's been very difficult because companies actually don't stand a chance right now to succeed that well if there are 70% of an illegal competition based on any industry if you did that. And I just think that aspect of it too is really, really, like I said, quite irresponsible. Have you heard any rumblings that something will be done over this side?
Yeah, I definitely have. And it's something, again, for the loyal listeners, you've heard Todd and I speak of this several times before. We always compare Canada and California. In my opinion, they're both macros. It's not a micro-macro conversation. These are both, as far as geographical locations that have a lot of focus and emphasis on legalization, but both have challenges around that. And Canada has taken an interesting approach as far as what I've gathered, and now this is countrywide. I'm not picking on one specific province or another, but they've put more of a focus on the tail versus the head. And what I mean by that is, they're really trying to shut down the retail side of black market, or what might have been considered gray market up until full legalization. But they're trying to shut it down on the front end, but they're not going to the source on the back end. And that's where I think it's a little different than what's going on in California, which, to your point, we're at 80% plus, last I checked, on illicit versus legal. because of this tough transition as well, all the rules and regulations and licensing and just red tape and all the rest of it. So they've been going after the retail shops. That's been more of a municipality effort. But when you go to state level, or so we'll say that's more of like comparable to a province level, right? So more of the micro. But if you're looking at the large scale, what the state's doing, the state is very much going after the head. They're going after those illicit growers up in the Emerald Triangle. You mentioned Humboldt. It's happening. They just did major busts up in Humboldt, Trinity, Eureka, Garberville, all Northern California, where they're coming in and just killing off these grow operations. So they're really going after the head so that the supply dries up going to this illicit market. If you're not in the system, if you're not into what will soon be a statewide program of the track and trace, which means every single biomass, every single piece of it is tracked from production to sale, then really you're not going to survive. So it's different approaches from different governments, but it still is a challenge for the legal. Because the legal guys are like, hey, I just spent $500,000 on my license or several million on my grow op or a few million on my storefront, and there's a guy right down the street that's selling it for less and obviously has 10 times the foot traffic. So
I've heard rumors, though. I've heard some rumors that maybe some of the illegal drugs are actually supplying some of the legal outlets to sell it. I don't know if you've ever heard any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's tied to one. We always try to to keep out specific names, but there is unfortunately one LP that they did find out was sourcing what we call black market cannabis to feed the legal market, and it was even being shipped overseas. I spoke of Germany earlier, but some of it was found in a delivery, a shipment to Germany through a similar kind of track and trace and accountability program for that product. That same company, you mentioned stocks and investments, their valuation dropped from 1.5 bill approximately Canadian to about 500 mil. So all of a sudden they saw a substantial loss or equivalent to 2/3, of every dollar just disintegrate based on some of these issues they've had. So it's very real, and I think you're right. I think the day and age of just investing while it's early, that was maybe 3-4 as little as 2 years ago, but not anymore. You have to be very strategic. Don't shotgun, take the sniper rifle, and really focus and hone in on what you think is an advantageous investment for you. Do your homework. I mean, it's a moving target, but you can still find out approximate speed and trajectory that this object is going, that you're going after for investment. So be smart about it for sure.
Very well said. Lance Lambert is joining us from BovedaInc.com, BovedaInc, BovedaInc.com, hashtag Boveda Cannabis. Again, they don't touch the plant, they just keep her fresh. Would some of our listeners be surprised to find out who the second largest cannabis market in the world is?
I would think so. This is one, we talk about the U.S. market. We talk about the Canadian market. And typically, the number 2 spot has been held by Canada. And I think that says a lot because, again, we've talked about this. Approximately 36 million inhabitants in Canada and about 40 million in California alone. But obviously, we have a whole country behind us as well that has several other legal states. But this is interesting is that they're seeing a shift. And this specifically coming from the Motley Fool. I love all their information and updates they give. But according to a story they provided, getting information from the Prohibition Partners, they believe the market for legal cannabis in Asia could be worth more than $5.8 billion by 2024, which would eclipse the $5.2 billion that Canada would have by the same time. Now, this is all very, kind of shooting from the hip approach towards total market potential. They take into factor the numbers of total occupants within a given region or country, and then kind of back it out from there based on existing sales and consumption. Asia is a wild card because a better part of it has been illegal up until Thailand just launched their medical program a few months ago. South Korea is getting on board as well. But I think it speaks volumes. And keep in mind that Asia, just like the Middle East and India, they've got a population over 1 billion. I mean, so does the continent of Africa. We've talked about they've got 1.4 billion. So they've got a lot of people. So while the percentage of consumer in that region is substantially lower than your home or mine, the numbers obviously 10% of a billion versus 20% of 40 million or 36 million, right? That's where it makes the impact.
Yeah, it's unreal to think, that you talk about ending stigma. So once you start talking about Asia having a massive $1 billion cannabis market, we know that stigmas are starting to be ended because there's still a lot of areas in Asia that you can go to jail for life or something. I believe if you.
Oh my gosh, yeah. A great place I recommend visiting, and it was on the lower end of my bucket list, but I finally got to go to speak a handful of years ago, was Singapore. And Singapore is a phenomenally clean city-state. They're very, very proud of their country and how far they've come. And having said that, though, if you have enough with intent for distribution, that's capital punishment. So don't take any drugs, in my opinion. Do not take any drugs to Singapore. A great place to visit, but do the things that are legal, alcohol, etc., if you so choose. But again, you're right. There's some places where it's very illicit. And something came up, it's kind of funny. Speaking of, Asia versus North America, there's been a little bit of a trade war thing going on between the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
And over there, they're saying, well, stop allowing your cannabis to be imported into our country. And over here, of course, U.S. was saying, we'll stop allowing the importation of synthetic drugs, DMT, MDMA, et cetera, being imported. And it's this whole back and forth. And it's like the illicit market, no matter the country, the person, the ethnic, the religious background, there's going to be drugs that are legal and non-legal are consumed in all places. That's one thing I've found in my travels. It's not going to change. It's really not. So.
Yep, that's just sort of, I guess, human nature, human culture. They're going to find it and find something one way or another, and for some reason, people will have their choices that might be on the illegal side of things, and you're right, that's never going away. Lance Lambert, you mentioned Africa briefly and the population there. I do actually some sort of IR work and brand strategy work with a company called Halo. You might have heard of Halo Labs.
Oh, definitely.
They have a property in Lesotho that we've been learning about in Africa, with hectares and hectares of land to eventually do outdoor growth. And I learned so much about Lesotho. I was really blown away by this mountain kingdom nation with the highest highs and the lowest lows, and a great ability to grow, much like you've seen in certain areas in the States before with this great tropical climates and stuff. Good humidity controls. It really is. It's still like, despite the markets and despite us complaining about black markets, ruling a lot of the sales still, as the world opens up, like we really still are in, the second or third inning here, aren't we?
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. Like you talk about Africa, it's one thing that dumbfounds me, and I was never big on geography back in school, but, the more that I get involved with this industry, the more I learn about these things. But, oh my gosh, 54 countries in Africa, over 200 million populace in Nigeria alone, 112 million in Ethiopia. These are, even Egypt, 100 million. These are large populace, and it really kind of puts things into perspective. All of a sudden, 300 million, and let alone 36 million, isn't so much. And again, what the opportunities are, to hear that you're working with someone over there right now, in my opinion, Africa's on fire, specifically the southern region, of course, like, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, all these countries are coming online. And it's an interesting ideology, though. We talk about stigmas and stereotypes. Cannabis, and talking to friends in South Africa, they said typically it's been kind of looked down on, right? It's a little less common, whereas here you'll find Fortune 500 people all day that consume cannabis. To them, that's like a beer versus some other illicit drugs. But over there, it's always been kind of this, whatever, $1 a gram, $2 a gram retail, because it just didn't have much emphasis or focus. But it's a totally different, I wouldn't say stigma, but kind of perception of cannabis in that area versus North America versus South America versus Asia. I think that's one thing that surprises me between countries.
Well, that's what eventually branding does, right? There's sort of views on alcohol across the board that I think are pretty equal. You go out, you have a couple drinks, and you have a good time as long as you don't drink too much. Because if you drink too much, you feel like crap the next day. That's just kind of, let's be honest, that's what everyone knows about alcohol. You want to try a nice scotch, you want to try a nice wine, you want to spend a little bit more money, you want to really enjoy the flavors and sip it and stuff. But you can't talk about cannabis these ways. You you can't brand it for what it is. And I actually think that's an error on some of the government. Well, they do it better in the States, but I think you should be able to brand cannabis. You should be able to talk about it in a way that is responsible and educational, because to be honest, you want to create favorable views, and that's educating people by branding it is going to help end these stigmas we speak of.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of those brands, right now we're seeing cross-licensing, as we call it, via, state to state, state to country. There's brands coming down from Canada. There's brands going up to Canada. But I agree. I think some of those brands are really going to help kind of normalize it. I mean, and going back to, not to pick on China, but China, they're very big on brands. They're very big on Western culture. I mean, cigar shops are popping up left and right there. You mentioned Scotch and fine quality bourbons and such. That's becoming more popular there. American automobiles, Buick accounts for 24% of all automotive sales in China. That's unreal. A staggering number for one. Yeah, and Buick, man, not even Cadillac. It's like, why? But they have this certain perception, and they feel that if I'm successful, this is how I act, this is what I consume, this is what I drive, this is what I wear. And so I am hoping that, to your point again, some of these larger scale brands, and none have really come, I would say, always at the top. There's some big names we know of, right? MedMen, Canopy, Aurora, Tilray, Tweed. They're all relevant names. But who's really become a Coca-Cola, or who's really become a Kleenex or an Apple or a fill in the blank, right? We aren't quite there yet, but I think when we do get there, it's going to be the onus and responsibility of that brand to lead with education and really carry that continuity and consistency in saying cannabis is okay at a global level, not just on a domestic stage or on a North American stage. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing as far as evolution in the industry.
Well, here's some evolution in the industry in America. The feds have awarded $3 million in grants to study the marijuana ingredients as alternatives to opioids. That's great progress there.
Oh, my gosh, it is. This is so, I get so excited. And you know this, Todd. I mean, I'm far from a political geek, but again, my passion has led me to that door. And this is a big deal. The feds have always been apprehensive because of some of the things left over from reefer madness, from the Nixon era, from the Reagan era with the DARE program. I think also when it comes down to it, I think there's been a lot of influence on avoiding cannabis thanks to other industries that have a lot of money when it comes to lobbyists in D.C. And I'm picking specifically on pharmaceutical, on alcohol, even on the industrial side, because again, cannabis and even a subset thereof that is hemp, it can make a huge impact on those industry. I mean, we've already seen, we talked about Switzerland, how they saw an 18% decrease in cigarette consumption once they brought out hemp-based cigarettes. And so we know that this is an ideal alternative, not just from a medical, but from a recreational standpoint. But likewise, the same for you compare this product to cotton or you compare it to paper. I mean, it wins in every battle. So it's unfortunate, but finally, D.C. got the memo. There's enough people, again, we always talk about both sides of it, the coin, the Republican, the Democratic, both are supporting this. And it's about time. Really the U.S. needed to get these grants going. They need more quality cannabis to be tested because the stuff that's coming out of the South from the one facility that produces cannabis to be tested from a medical standpoint in this country is subpar. It's pretty much what we call ditch weed or just, swag in a bag, whatever term you want to use. So it's high time, and the $3 million is not a lot, but in my opinion, it's enough to get it done, and that's what we need to do. It's time to start studying it domestically, like they are in places like Israel or even Canada.
And to add to this, there is a story, Lance Lambert from Boveda.com was joining us this week that came out with NFL legend Calvin Johnson, one of the greatest wide receivers really in the NFL of all time. And he basically came out right there and said he used cannabis after every game to relieve pain, and he really wanted to avoid getting tangled in that opioid abuse that was taking place in so many locker rooms. Very candid about that. And I just think that stuff, I got to be honest, I know you can't make medical claims about cannabis right now, but when you start to hear that and you hear about the issues with NFL players of pain management and really the stuff that they should not be doing, and then, of course, post-career effects from medications and concussion syndromes and all that kind of stuff, here's a guy that's going, I'm just going to use the plant, and it worked, and look where I am. I'm doing pretty good today. I think we need more messages like this. I really do.
I agree. I got to spend some time with John Sally and his daughter. NBA, he was the first player in NBA history to win championships with 3 franchises. So this guy has his own kind of respective track record. He's very open about how he's supportive of cannabis. He has ties to companies in the industry. His daughter has a cannabis company that's cross-licensed in several states. But I love how these guys that are coming out of, not to your point, not just the NHL, not just the NFL, not just the NBA, not just the NBA. I mean, they're coming from all professional sports and saying, this is something I did. I didn't, to your point, I didn't want those pills that the team doctor kept giving me. I didn't want to feel the pain and have to, deal with the side effects of pharmaceuticals. I think it speaks volumes for these individuals. And they're good guys. I mean, John Sally is a genuine good guy, speaks from the heart, only there to make a difference, make an impact. These aren't some, bad boys that were always looked down upon or never played the game right or did workarounds. I mean, these are, upright individuals from their respective industries that are coming out and being advocates. And that's what we need. Those are the things. Every single conversation and every single advocate helps support the cause to normalize and destigmatize the industry. And that's what excites me as well.
Hey, Sally played on the Raptors for a little bit, so
yeah, man.
You're speaking of one of our
he's got
alum.
a soft spot for Canada.
What's that?
He's got a soft spot for Canada, man. He definitely. That's why it's great to see him up there in Vancouver. I mean, he really does. So
that's so cool. We love John Sally, and so nice to know that his daughter is in the industry. It's lots of great opportunity in this industry still. The one thing I would tell people, if you sort of only focus on it from 2 angles, one here in Canada on the legal side where you might be disappointed with the rollout, and then 2 as an investor, and if you really got in 6-7 months ago, you'd be, oh man, why am I investing in this space right now? But still, these conversations need to continue to happen. You're going to see a lot of more catalysts come down the road to help companies like crackdowns, like control, like safe banking acts, like federal legalization. I really, truly believe that we're, like I said earlier, Lance Lambert from Boveda.com, it's so early still. It really is so early.
Yeah, it is.
So let's all enjoy it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we're working in dog years, people. It moves very fast. I mean, you've been close enough in proximity, Todd. You can totally relate. I mean, so much has happened in the last 5 years, and it feels like 10. But it's not too late. I mean, it's not too late to move down this path. And again, so many opportunities. Seeing the evolution of hemp, how that's become so popular and mainstream, and it's actually surpassed searches on Google, surpassing marijuana, cannabis. Hemp is the new hot thing. CBD is obviously the derivative that comes from hemp, legal in all 50 states. I mean, it's really cool to see that evolution as well, because that's something that does focus on more of the body versus the heady, and again, it crosses all borders. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we've got a whole other evolution within an evolution that's going on right now as it relates to this plant. So no matter what industry you're in, that's one thing I say too, there's always opportunity. Just follow your passion. If you're in HR, if you're a lawyer, if you're a chemist, if you're a salesman, this category has a place for everyone as far as your background and expertise. It's important to be passionate about what you do, and if this is something that you're interested in, definitely, to your point, we're in the early stages. We're just scratching the surface here.
Thank you, Lance. Do we still have John from Michigan on the phone, Bilal?
I had to kind of clear a phone line for a certain IndyCar champion, so just to be safe.
We got an IndyCar champion. Okay, well, why don't we, Lance? Yeah. I might cut you off early. Well, we got to you early, so I don't feel that bad.
Hey, no, don't. It's worth coming. When you got someone like that coming online, because me, GP and Indy for the win. Not much of a ball sport kind of guy.
Are you a fan of Joseph Newgarden?
Yeah, definitely, man. He's got some good stuff going on in his career.
Well, no doubt, man. The title winner. Well, I do got to get to a news break, though, so we got to take a break. First off, all, thank you, Lance. Always great education in terms of what's going on in the cannabis space all over, and it really is unbelievable to talk to you. I tell people all the time, you're one of the best spoken guys I've ever met, not only just in this space but everywhere, and it's just so great to give the education. It's so proper to do that. From Boveda.com, we appreciate your time, Lance Lambert.
Hey, thanks so much, Ty. I appreciate it. Thank you both.
Okay, cheers, man.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.